Adrian Holt had grown up inside the kind of wealth most people only read about. His father, Bennett Holt, owned half the skyline in 3 American cities, and his mother, Margaret Holt, ran charities that often appeared on the covers of glossy magazines. Their mansion in Connecticut had wings, actual wings, as though it had been built not to be lived in, but to be admired like a museum. And yet, despite every advantage, Adrian lived with a quiet ache that all the money in the world couldn't soothe. He was almost 30, heir to a billion-dollar empire, and still had not found the one thing he wanted more than anything else, a love that felt real. Not arranged, not bought, not pretended. Genuine love, love without strings. For years, every woman he met seemed to fit the same pattern. Perfect smiles, perfect manners, perfect timing, but hollow intentions. He had begun to suspect that real love simply wasn't meant for someone born into a world where everything could be bought. Everything except sincerity. One rainy Wednesday afternoon in Manhattan, Adrian stepped into a small, nearly forgotten bookshop tucked between 2 towering modern buildings. The air smelled like dust, old pages, and the kind of quiet that didn't exist in his world. He had ducked inside, seeking a moment to breathe. That was where he saw her. She stood by a tall shelf, gently turning the yellowed pages of a second-hand poetry book. She was a young black woman, slim, soft-spoken, with warm, kind eyes, and a certain quiet grace that made everything around her slow down. She wore a faded jean jacket, her curly hair tucked loosely behind one ear. She looked like someone who belonged in a world of stories and hope. Her name, he would learn later, was Talia Brooks. They met by accident. A book slipped from the shelf, and both bent down to catch it at the same time. Their hands brushed, and she startled, offering a shy, apologetic smile. And then something happened that struck Adrian like lightning. She didn't recognize him. She didn't flinch at his designer shoes, didn't widen her eyes at his last name, didn't stare at him like he was a prize to be won. She treated him like a stranger, an ordinary man. It was refreshing. It was shocking. It was intoxicating. They talked for nearly an hour as rain tapped softly against the windows. They laughed over their favorite authors, shared childhood memories, and exchanged stories about the dreams that kept them awake at night. Talia told him she worked 2 jobs, one at a community center and another as a waitress in the evenings. She lived modestly, sending most of her income to support her grandmother. There was nothing glamorous about her life, but everything about her was real. Before leaving, he asked if she'd like to meet again. He was almost nervous, something he had not felt around anyone in years. She hesitated for a moment, then said yes. What followed over the next few months was a kind of love Adrian never believed he'd find. They walked through parks together, shared cheap street food, and talked late into the night. She challenged him, she grounded him, she listened to him, and she saw him. Not the inheritance, not the power, not the celebrity, just Adrian. It did not take long before he knew he wanted his family to meet her. He knew the worlds they came from were wildly different, but he believed, naively perhaps, that love was enough to bridge the gaps, that once his parents saw the woman he loved, they too would welcome her. Talia hesitated. She wasn't blind to the differences in their backgrounds, but Adrian insisted, promising that it would be fine, that his parents would see her heart. So she agreed to visit the Holt mansion for dinner. The estate glowed with warm lights. Chandeliers shimmered like frozen fireworks, and polished marble floors reflected everything like a mirror. The smell of roasted herbs drifted through the hallways. Staff moved quietly, setting the dinner table with the kind of elegance most people only witnessed in films. Talia felt as though she had stepped into another world. Her dress was simple, modest, and though she looked beautiful, she felt painfully aware of how different she was from the opulent setting. Adrian held her hand tightly. "You're safe with me," he whispered. His father greeted her warmly, offering a firm handshake and a genuine smile. Bennett Holt had always been the more grounded of the two parents, but his mother, Margaret, her smile did not reach her eyes. She looked at Talia the way one might inspect a painting, searching for imperfections, evaluating her against silent expectations. Dinner began politely, too politely, the kind of politeness that feels sharp, thin, and cold. Margaret asked questions that were courteous on the surface. "And where did you attend school? How long have you known our son? What does your family do? Where exactly are you from?" Each question felt like a test. Adrian kept squeezing Talia's hand under the table, silently apologizing for every uncomfortable moment. But everything changed near the end of the meal. Talia leaned forward slightly, brushing her hair back, and Margaret saw it. The scar. A long, thin, jagged white scar across the right side of Talia's neck. It wasn't fresh, but it was unmistakably the kind of scar left by something violent, something painful, something that suggested a story no one had asked to hear yet. Margaret froze. Her fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the plate. "What is that on your neck?" The room went silent. Talia instinctively covered the scar with her hand. It's nothing. Something from a long time ago." Margaret pushed her chair back with a harsh scrape. "Nothing? That is not nothing." "Mother," Adrian warned, but she wasn't listening. Her eyes narrowed with fear or judgment, perhaps both. "That is the kind of scar people get from a violent life, from trouble, from dangerous choices. And you bring this girl into our home with no explanation?"
"Margaret," Bennett said gently, "enough." But Margaret was far past restraint. She pointed at the scar as if it was a criminal act. "You are hiding something. That mark tells a story, and it is not a good one." Talia's eyes filled with tears. She fought desperately to hold back. She stood abruptly from her seat. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have come." She rushed out of the dining room. Adrian immediately followed her, ignoring his mother calling after him. He found Talia sitting on the front steps, shaking, tears running silently down her face. She looked small, fragile, and deeply wounded. "Talia," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Please look at me." She shook her head. "Your mother is right," she whispered. "I don't belong here." "Don't say that. You don't know what that scar is from. You don't know why I hide it." "Then tell me," he said gently. "Let me understand." She took a deep breath, her voice breaking as she spoke. "When I was 17, a man tried to pull me into his car. I fought. I screamed. I survived. But he cut me. I almost died. My grandmother found me. I spent months healing, inside and out. And ever since then, people judge me when they see the scar, as if I'm damaged, as if I deserved something horrible." Adrian felt something inside him crack. "You didn't deserve any of it," he whispered. "You are the strongest person I know. That scar is not shameful. It's proof that you lived, that you fought." She sobbed, leaning against him. Inside the mansion, behind the tall glass windows, Margaret stood silently watching. Something shifted in her expression, a crack in her rigid certainty. She'd acted out of fear, out of prejudice, out of a desire to control her son's future. But seeing him kneel beside a crying girl, seeing the depth of their bond, forced her to confront her own cruelty. After nearly an hour, Margaret stepped outside. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, the night breeze tugging at the edges of it. Talia quickly stood when she saw her, wiping her tears, bracing for another blow. But Margaret surprised them both. She looked not at the scar, but into the girl's eyes. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "I reacted out of fear and out of ignorance. You didn't deserve that." Adrian stared, stunned. Talia said nothing, tears still clinging to her lashes. Margaret took a shaky breath. "I don't know your story fully, but I want to. If you are the woman my son loves, then I want to understand you, truly understand you, not judge you on something that hurt you." She hesitated, then added softly, "Will you allow me another chance?" Talia bowed her head, emotions overwhelming her. After a long moment, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. And for the first time that evening, Margaret smiled, genuinely, humbly. They walked back inside together, not as perfect strangers or adversaries, but as three people trying to build something fragile and new. The road ahead wouldn't be perfect. Healing rarely is, but that night marked the beginning of acceptance, understanding, and eventually a new family forming. And through it all, Adrian knew he had finally found his real love. Not in wealth, not in status, but in a girl who carried both scars and hope, and who loved him for who he truly was. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more.